Okay. Thank you everybody for coming, and I apologize for not letting everybody in last time. I did a podcast or did a group talk and accidentally didn't know how to let people in. So I apologize. I'm never going to let that happen again. So I just did a talk on, I continued the talk on the triune, talking about the trinistic model. But there was something that I didn't get to talk about that I want to talk about now. What I didn't get to talk about was I wanted to continue on a discussion that I had in my last podcast, where I was talking about the relationship between the original dynamic of the Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya conspiring to manifest as the Nirmanakaya with the relationship of space, time, and matter. And when I did this, I incorrectly designated the Dharmakaya as being inactive. And somebody was good enough to point that out on the YouTube forum, and it got me thinking. It provoked a lot of thoughts that I want to share with you. And so I thought that was a really good teaching point. Unfortunately, that person's not here, but I'm going to just quickly go over the original point that he corrected me on. So I'm going to use my chalkboard for that, or my eraser board for that. Bring it up as close as I can to the picture. Boom. All right, there we are. Okay, could you guys make out the lettering? And maybe not read my handwriting because it's horrible, but at least you could follow me. All right. So this was my original point. This was what originally blew me away. Was I was noticing that, and now I'm not going to call it the inactive because somebody corrected it. I was saying the inactive Dharmakaya guides the Sambhogakaya, but now I'm going to change my word because I think that's a worthy correction. I'm going to say the motionless, the still Dharmakaya guides the Sambhogakaya how to move the Dharmakaya. So basically, and again, this kind of reminds me of this diagram of Kali, how Kali is one thing, but by one hand she's taking your hand to deliver the baby, and the other hand she's eating herself. It's one thing. So let's say this is the Dharmakaya using the Sambhogakaya to move on itself, teaching it. It's basically like the bending I'm talking about. Like the Dharmakaya, by the essence of it, instructs the Sambhogakaya how to bend, is basically what I'm trying to get at. So simultaneously, the Sambhogakaya is warping the Dharmakaya, resulting in the Nirmanakaya. So that's something we've gone through 100 times. Anybody that's listened to me knows that's all I ever say. You got aware space bending to create, aware space bending on itself to result in Nirmanakaya or duality. So, and then obviously the space-time matter, what I was originally pointing out is that when you read science, they tell you that space-time guides matter to warp space and time. And then they say that matter acts back on space and time by creating gravity, which is the attractive force. That's what they say. All right. So the reason I bring this up again is just to set that up for what I want to tell you about what I was thinking about this week. Some really cool insights that I got when somebody pointed out that I was incorrectly attributing the Dharmakaya to be inactive. As I said, I was describing as inactive because of the, oh, someone else is coming in. Oh, and this time I saw it. All right, admit. So now at least I know the mistake I made last time. All right, so I'm going to continue. Oh, I hope Anne-Marie's there. Very good. Thank you for coming, Anne-Marie. And I think you're actually at the last one, so I don't have to apologize to you. Thanks for coming again. I appreciate that. Yeah, very good to see you again, Anne-Marie. All right, and you're coming from far away too. You're coming from Asia too, so I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me. Yes.
No, I'm coming from Denmark.
Oh, Denmark, that's still far. I appreciate it. Thank you.
6 hours.
Thank you. Okay. You could watch the video to see basically what I'm talking about now. This talk is going to be about a really cool correction that somebody made for me. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with, let's say, Dzogchen when they break down the Trikaya. But the last talk I did, I was talking about how the inactive Dharmakaya guides the Sambhogakaya. And somebody on the internet corrected me that the Dharmakaya is not inactive, it's active. And I was just starting to explain before you popped in that I was calling it active because it's moving. And he was calling it inactive or active. I'm sorry. He was looking at as being active because it's, as Rod pointed out, it's got the power, it's got the potential. All right. So as I thought about that, I realized that we use the word active in two different ways. One, I described as active. This is the way that the classic traditional way, with the person that was correcting me, this is the definition he was using of active. Active could mean being potent as opposed to being impotent, right? Something being potent as something being impotent, not potent. All right. And then I was using the word active to be moving as opposed to being still. So in my mind, I thought I was being correct, but he made a subtle nuance to point out that the active that he was referring to was the potent. And as I thought about that, I asked my wife what she thought was the active part of me moving my arm. And I guess I expected her to say that she thought the active part would be the hand moving, as I was attributing. But I guess since I set up the question, she got it right, and she realized, well, it depends on which way you look at it. And she intuitively got that the mind is activating stilly, motionless. The brain is sitting there motionless, using its power, its potential to guide the hand to move so it can act for itself. And if you think about it, the whole thing's kind of creepy because the brain is, and I just know this from sleep medicine, everything is geared to give the brain food. The whole system we got, the digestive system, the lungs, the heart, everything is just to get oxygen to the brain, the whole thing. And so basically the brain guides us, the impotent non-thing, to move, to bring food in and resources and procreate and build the things to bring oxygen just to the brain. So the brain is mirroring the original dynamic of just being stillness, unmoving, and yet guiding the what did I call it? The impotent object to move and sustain itself, just like the picture of Kali, where she's, taking sustenance and then feeding herself, and just this whole thing. It's just this weird, creepy dynamic, and which goes back to the Zen thing. If anybody's familiar with Zen, the host for the host. That's why I talked about possession. It's this weird thing of, a puppeteer. You could look at the puppeteer. The puppeteer is, so I'm getting ahead of myself. So as I thought about what is active, the brain or the arms, and it just shows, also this probably speaks to language, as Rod was speaking out, it just speaks to how we use language. It probably's got something to do with that. But it was making me think, I was like, wow, wonder if action is like the very word that everything rests on. And I was thinking about that because activity, and I'm wondering if Rod knows this, if it comes from the word action, because action we do know is what the word karma means. And karma is, extremely relevant to the world. You can look at the world as just karma. Go ahead, Rod.
Cause and effect.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. But anyway, I started to think that, okay, so basically, so if we break down the word active, if we honor both ways, the way that this other person was describing as the potent aspect, as opposed to being impotent, and then the way I was using it as moving, as opposed to being still, we would really have to, nuance the words by saying motionlessly active. Like that's the way I would describe it. Motionlessly active is inactive active. So basically we'd have to nuance the word active to have an inactive active, which is the motionlessly active, the potent active, or the passive movement, passive activity is active inactivity, and that would be the moving. So one of them's guiding and one of them's moving. So all life is just this relationship between guiding and moving, just like we saw with space and time and matter. One guides, one moves, just like with the Dharmakaya, one guides and one moves. It's
Cause and effect.
just cause and effect. Exactly. And what I love about that is because it has no, you can't say which one's causing or affecting. It's a symbiotic relationship that goes beyond it goes beyond cause and effect, because you can't see which one they're both, you can't say which one. Oh, and I love this. Here's the example I came up with. And I think I said it on the video, but now I'll repeat it again since Rod's here. The reason I was saying you can't see which one is the cause and you can't see which one is the effect, I use the example of a river bend acting in unison. So basically the river, so the bank of a river, just picture the bank of a river is the no, I'm not going to say inactive, is the unmoving but powerful part. That's the unmoving part that is going to influence how the river is going to be made. And that's why in Dzogchen they would call it the essence. And the essence of it would just be its shape. That's what it's because now the moving water, that is going to be the moving part. So the moving part is going to be guided by the shape of the riverbank, and then the riverbank, and then the water is going to then act back upon the riverbank by pounding into it and exaggerating whatever groove was there in the first place. And that's exactly how it works. And that from that point on, you can't say what takes place first. Is the riverbank shaping the water to tell it how to move, or is the water shaping the riverbank and basically digging into that groove and making the shape, which in space, time, and matter, the result is gravity. And then in my analogy of the river bend, the analogy of that is the winding river. But the reason I like this winding river is you really can't say which comes first. You know, you're looking at the river and you really can't say. It's a symbiotic relationship of the water acting upon the river and making that groove dig deep back further and further. But the reason it's doing that in the first place is because the essence of that river bank, how soft it was, how it was shaped, all the different contours, the essence of that riverbank was guiding the water by the essence of whatever it was. So I love it because it's a symbiotic relationship to where cause and effect are happening, but you can't tell what's happening cause or effect. Effect is affecting cause and cause is affecting effect. I don't know, but you get my point.
Yeah.
You have anything to add on to that, Rod?
No, I think the key that, our little ape minds have a problem with is, like you say, cause and effect are two different
Linear.
things. They're defined as two different things, but when you boil it down to, they are the same thing, sort of like the Dharmakaya, the Sambhakaya.
Yeah.
It's still one thing, and it's really
Yes.
always going to cause us a bit of a problem.
And once again, it's that wedge. It's always getting down to that wedge, what I call the original tension. It's that original wedge between the active and the movement, between the, the guiding and the moving. But another example I thought of the guiding and the moving is the obvious example of the puppeteer and the puppet. So the puppeteer would be the still, powerful part. And the puppet would be the moving. Everything that we see in the world, everything that we see is merely the puppet, and it's inactive. So when we look at the world, we see it as being active. We see, look at the world, it's moving and it's doing that thing, but we don't see that power that's actually making it work. And now, if you don't mind, Rod, I want you to use that, explain that example again of how we use that power with the fulcrum to make something move. And I'll set it up a little bit with a couple quotes. One is that Aristotle described the world, or God, maybe, I forget the quote, but something like God is the still hinge for the moving world.
Yeah.
Moving door or something like that.
Yeah.
You get my point. But yeah, explain that, Rod, in terms of the fulcrum and the power.
Yeah. So how I've seen it by another guy, and we won't go into who that is, but
I like Walter Russell.
It's Walter Russell stuff. Yeah, it's Walter Russell stuff. So what he says is, you can equate it to this stillness that he calls God is like a fulcrum, like a still fulcrum. And then you put a lever on it, and the lever gets its power, gets its ability to do work from the power of the stillness. Now there's another force working on it called like desire, or something that winds up pushing,
Mhm.
but it wouldn't have, this lever would not have any power if it wasn't sitting on the still
Yeah.
point, right?
That's it.
So those are three things:
Yeah.
the stillness, the ability to move, and
Yes.
the desire to move it.
Wow. That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
So
Yeah.
that's how it's kind of been explained to me. And it's not a complete metaphor, because you're trying to figure out, well, what is this force that pushes down and makes the work happen? But
And
there would be no work without the still point. In other words, remove the fulcrum, you got a lever and you push down on it, it doesn't do anything because it's not sitting on the still point.
Yep. And this once again brings me back to what you said is a weakness with any analogy, is because the reality of what we're talking about is self-arising, self-origination. And that is beyond time. That is, we're used, like you said, we're used to thinking linear, and we're thinking cause and effect in the first cause. But what we're actually talking about is self-arising or self-origination. So now let's go back to that example of where you said what would make it move, and let's apply with what we're actually talking about of awareness. Now there's no what would make it move, just aware, the nature of awareness, the essence of and actually now we're kind of getting into what I wanted to get into. The essence of space is, so now we're talking about basically aware space, the inseparability of aware space. The essence of space is to be unbounded and to be unlimited. And then the essence of the aware aspect would be to be lucid clarity. So the inseparability of those two, because unbounded and unlimited means it's infinite, means there's nothing else. And then the awareness part means it's active. So by the inseparability of those two, there's your why the fuck did it move in the first place? Just by the nature of what it is. It doesn't need a why. And that's the whole reason why philosophy and science and everybody has a whole problem with the truth, is because they're looking for a first cause. They're looking for something that happened and it didn't. It's happening. Reality is happening. We're watching the self-arising. We're watching self-origination happen right now. This is it. This is the beginning. This is the virgin birth. This is the immaculate. We're watching it self-arise. There was no beginning. But
yeah, even in the like Hindu tradition of, is it, Brahma breathes out,
I recorded.
and he breathes out for 14 billion years and then breathes back in for 14 billion years.
Yes.
And so it's like, that's not something that starts and stops.
Yes.
It never starts and stops, even though it's
Exactly.
14 billion, I've got that wrong, and Gunnar can let me have it for it, but he knows what I'm talking about.
No, and the reason I agree with that is because it goes back to the original dynamic. You can't get away from the fact that that all there is, and Dzogchen will say clarity, emptiness and clarity. So let's just start with their model, since that's respected. I like aware space, but since they're a traditional model, everything starts from the inseparability of clarity and emptiness. Because of the clarity aspect, there's always going to be a rising. That's what the clarity is. That's the aliveness part. There's always going to be a rising. So now this is an analogy I used, and I guess I don't know, maybe in the last talk I just did. Anne Marie could correct me if I'm wrong. How I was trying to bring those two seemingly contradictory things together was looking at a waveform. The waveform is endless. The waveform has no beginning and has no ending. Just the waveform itself, the flat line, it has no beginning. But because of the clarity, that impulse to attract to itself, it is going to rise. Now you have the birth. Now you have a beginning. That deflection is the beginning of something. So now let me go ahead and erase my my chalkboard so I could do this. So in reality, all there is this, just aware space. But its nature, because aware space is inseparable from clarity, it's going to arise. And so now this aware space, it's going to arise. And so now because of that arising, now you have a beginning and an end to something. So we could see the contradiction, or no, the paradox solved between seemingly being infinite and then having a beginning and ending. The beginning and ending, it is only an appearance. It appears to have a beginning and it appears to have an ending, but it's the same goddamn wave. It's the same wave, whether it's going like this or whether it's going like that or whether it's going like that. It has no beginning or ending. This, your fictitious life, had a this waveform, this fictitious waveform had a beginning right there. You can see it. There's the birth, there's death, but life is all of this. So if this is life, and what life does is it births and it dies. It births and it dies. But life is on continuing. Life
Yeah,
is,
one way to look at that is that appearances
have beginnings and endings.
have appearances birth and die, or as Walter Russell puts it, bodies birth and die. Like everything's a body, like even a tree is a body, and this is my body, but the life underneath it is always the same. It's just life.
Yeah.
The life of a tree, the life of a rock, the life of a house. Bodies appear and disappear, and that's all that's happening is bodies, appearances. So
and I think there's
life is unchanging.
And I think there's multiple layers in between that. We did a talk, me and you, on where I think there's multiple layers between you get to just nothingness and form. There's vibration, there's frequency, there's oscillation, there's shadows, there's light, then there's spectrums, there's frequency, and then finally you get to forms and basic forms. And even when you're saying that about what Walter Russell was saying about the forms or people and everything, even thoughts, I see even thoughts as forms. Everything, anything that forms is a form.
A thought form. It's
exactly.
A subtle form.
Subtle, I like that. And that's
a subtle form.
I appreciate
there's gross, there's gross form and there's subtle form, and it gets endless.
So a couple other points I just want to not leave off on, since I think we tackled that really cool dynamic that I was talking about, the active, that relationship between the active. By the way, all this started because of you, Rob, with relationships. That whole talk was about relationships, and this is still, we're talking about relationships.
Which is what was in your book. I mean, that was in your book. It was quite a revelation to me. I hadn't looked at it that way. Yeah.
Well, it just goes to show, though, I could forget something that was important. Like, it's just about what's emphasized. Like, I went on to emphasize other things, and then you reminded me of something that now you got me excited about. So,
well, whatever lens you look through, you're still going to come back to the only thing that there is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another paradox.
All roads lead home.
That's where, I love that Gunnar is, keeping you on the traditional path, but you're looking at it from an untraditional path. And the only reason that they cross things is because there is a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. And speaking, and I appreciate that. While I was trying to work this out, I looked up all the qualities of the yin yang, because I assume that's got to be a tradition that I should resonate with, since everything I come from is Eastern philosophy. I don't know what traditions he's talking about when he's talking about traditions, but Eastern philosophy I've always resonated with, and everything did line up perfectly with that. But what I realized is that, and again, what the whole purpose of the trinistic model is, I just think for me, it's a deeper nuance of the dualistic explanation. In the yin yang, these are all the examples of the yin yang. These are an example of the dualistic opposites, the world of opposites, which I think has had a place. That's what non-duality is based on, is all opposites. But I'm just more interested in the triunistic relationships of the three, the essence, the nature, and the energy, which it's just, you can't translate those two. I mean, in some ways I try to get cute and think, well, let's just say the inseparability of the yin yang, of the yin and the yang is the yin yang, the inseparability of masculine and female is a baby, the inseparability of black and white is color. So in a way you could do that, but I don't feel like I want to force the two together. You know what I mean?
Those dualities of the yin and yang, if you study that, if you look at that symbol for a long freaking time, it's just, the dualities is just the first door. That's just the first door you go in.
There you go. That's why I said I think the triune is a deeper nuance. It opens up the how and the why. It answers questions that just stating that the Atman is Brahman, explain how. Now tell me the relationship between Atman and Brahman. Tell me the relationship between the yin and the yang. Now, not you, I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, if you start breaking the symbol down a little bit, these are points of now. Like, here's the eye of the white fish, here's the eye of the black fish, and here's this center point. where it's actually all arising from.
Love it. Wow, I never
you
got
have
that.
you have these, here's the now point here and it's white. So,
Oh,
keep your eye, if you're in the white, keep your eye on the dark, because,
yeah.
if you're in the
Wow.
dark, look for the light. There's just a million ways to interpret
Balance.
this.
And like my thing is, it is and it isn't always balance. Whatever you're saying, look for yourself to be wrong too. Like, I don't know if anyone watched the video on my experience, but I was about a year ago, my experience was, as I'd be thinking and watching my experience, I would, like, let's say, watch the formation of my internal dialogue or my thought. And then whatever thought I had, I noticed it would rotate like a globe to show the alternative of the thought. Everything was like that. No matter what I thought I had, it would naturally turn to reveal it is and it isn't. Like, that was my life. It is and it isn't. Oh, I like that and that. Like, it was just something that would just happen spontaneously. That's probably happening with all of us. That's the thing, is I don't think any of these experiences are unique. I just think they're unrecognized.
Yeah,
But
that's why they call it realization.
yeah, and the light, shining the light on. Good, thank you, Rod. So what do you think about this, guys? So to take the whole act, the fascination, my fascination this week with active, to break it down to a triune, is that what I saw was that really all there is the active, which is the base, which is the potential or the power, activating, which is the movement or the functioning, and then activity, which is the result or the fruit. So all there is active, activating, activity. You like it?
Yeah, I see that.
Or should it be action? That's what I was wondering. Is the real word action, and we're just calling it active? Is the real word action? Action is what it is. That's its essence. And what does it do? It activates. What is the nature of action? It activates. And what is the result? Activity, right? Isn't activity the result? The fruit? Anyway, but that's my thing on that. That's on activity. All right. So
Well,
now,
again, like you said, if you look at it purely enough, it doesn't matter what lens you're going to
yeah,
come from, you're going to wind up with the same conclusions about, like the Christians, they say God is omniscient, omnipotent, and everywhere present.
yes. Oh, wow.
Okay, so that
That's a
means
contradiction.
God can't be anything other than everything and nothing, So even traditional Christians have it, they just don't realize it.
It's kind of creepy, because this is how God, wait, what are the two things that you said God was? Omnipresent, what else?
Omnipotent, which is all powerful, omniscient, which is all knowing, and omnipresent, which is everywhere present.
And this is the omnipresent part. Even though where you think it's an individual, it's actually God.
Right, exactly.
You think it's an individual, it's actually God.
Or Buddha nature, or Brahman.
Well, but the analogy we use is God.
Yeah.
All right. So just one more little nuance on that, because these are all things I've been ruminating on this week. So another thing, getting back to the river thing, and I was trying to think of where you could start from the beginning. And maybe I even said this on the last video, was let's just picture a flat ground. The ground looks flat, but there's always going to be invaginations or indentations or an essence to it that we don't see. And only when the rain comes down or those lines exposed, and now you start to see grooves. And then, like I said, that whole dance of the guiding and the moving acts, where the rain acts upon the dirt and the groove gets bigger, which attracts more water, which makes the groove bigger, which attracts more water, which makes the groove bigger. You see what I'm saying? Oh, so what I was saying is, so basically the essence, the active aspect is it's the blueprint. That's the word I come up with. It's not moving. It's just a blueprint by its essence, by what it is, the qualities it has. It's going to guide it just by its essence, just by what it is. And in this case, we're talking about the essence as being unbounded and unobstructed. Therefore, it's going to be infinite. And therefore, the awareness is going to have nowhere to place its awareness but itself. Boom, there goes the fold, there goes the myriad things, and we're off to the races, folks.
One became the two, and the two became the 10,000.
Exactly, the 10,000 things. So let me see if it's worth going over this last thing I had. Now, I think it's basically how I started. I did start with the chalkboard, right? Did I get up on the chalkboard already?
You did some of it. You
Yeah.
didn't do the low. I don't think you did the lower half of whatever is written.
Okay, let me just, no, I think those were just yeah, I appreciate that's just gibberish. Let me just say it then without going to the board. What I got, what was cool, the nuance that I put on everything, just to sum everything up. Let's just do that. Let's just put a tight little bow on Mark's latest insight for the week. Taking into consideration the correction of active that I had, the subtle little correction, and the epiphany that it brought with it. But the whole beauty of the whole thing of space-time and acting back on matter and matter acting back on space-time and guiding and moving. I mean, how more beautiful could you get? We can't escape the fact that we're a mirror. And by the way, Anne-Marie, you were here for the last talk. Isn't that amazing that, I mean, the talk I did an hour ago, remember I was saying how everything in this world mirrors the original dynamic? Remember that? That's what we're talking about. This has no choice but to mirror the original thing. Everything that's going on in this world is mirroring the original dynamic. And apparently what the traditional people tell us is the original dynamic is this. The Dharmakaya, which is motionless without movement, it guides the passive Sambhogakaya how to move the Dharmakaya. Simultaneously, the Sambhogakaya is thus passively warping or bending or folding the Dharmakaya, resulting in the Nirmanakaya. And the Nirmanakaya is what we in this world now call space-time and matter. And space-time matter that mirrors the exact same dynamic where space and time guides matter, and then space and time acts on matter by guiding it how to move, and then matter acts back on space and time, resulting in gravity, which is the force of attraction, which is how we got started in this whole thing to begin with.
So if we use the analogy again of a fulcrum and lever,
yes,
then that means and I'm giddy because I never even thought of it this way, and it makes sense. It's actually the fulcrum that is pulling down or pushing up to make this thing, you know, that's how it allows it to be passive, but it's doing the work, whatever the work is, you know, however it does, because we're just using a fulcrum and a lever. So it's actually, there's no outside force pushing down to make something happen. It's being pulled from the fulcrum and pushed from the fulcrum and then pulled up. So that's a new insight on that metaphor for me.
And that's what I meant before when you're talking about, but it doesn't say what made it push in the first place. If you use the analogy of awareness, there's your answer.
There it is.
The inseparability of aware space naturally and spontaneously is going to manifest as that fold. And there you go. And that's why the Buddhists call it self-arising or self-originating. No one told it what to do. No one instructed. It's spontaneous. It has no choice.
It's its nature.
It's its nature. It's its nature. Its essence is to be, its nature is to move, and its result is the energy. And boom, that's all we start from is the energy. Everything we talk about is starting from the starting point of energy. But what people don't know is the hidden dance of the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya or the aware space to manifest as the world that we see it. So,
Mark, just a question, does it start with energy and consciousness?
No, I would say energy is the emergent property, and consciousness is also an emergent property, because remember, consciousness is awareness of awareness. So consciousness is emergent. So awareness would be the base, the path would be awareness to be attracted to itself, and the result would be consciousness.
But how does the energy know what to do? It just is helter-skelter?
I want to write that. I want to write something down real quick before I answer you. Okay. I would say everything is, like I said, it flows spontaneously from its base. So it doesn't do it willy-nilly. It does it based on the essence and the nature of the original dynamic. So remember, the essence of awareness, of space, is to be unbounded and unlimited. So basically, we're talking about the parents. So we're looking at a kid. Is the kid just going to go through life willy-nilly? No, he's going to do what he was genetically predisposed to do by his mom and his dad. So now I probably don't have to explain to you the whole essence of space and the whole essence of nature, of awareness, but the inseparability of aware space or clarity and luminous space, however you want to look at it, are going to necessarily dictate what the energy does. So if you want to look at it like the child, if the child's energy, it's not going to go through its life willy-nilly. It's going to go through necessarily acting based on its genetic predisposition of its mom and dad. And in this case, the mom and dad we're talking about is aware space, the original dynamic.
But the genetic predisposition is a kind of programming.
Yes, yes.
Well, so if we're going to look at it as nature, I think you have to look at it, you have to constantly go back to the fact that it's all one thing, and it's its nature.
Yep.
And its nature is not, I mean, there is to our senses, there's chaos. And, you know, there's a whole tradition of Masons and Hermeticists and stuff that there's order out of chaos. But the chaos is actually the same thing as the order, and the order is actually the same thing as the chaos. So it's not willy-nilly, it's just its nature. This is what it does. You know.
Get back to the program. So what do you think about that, Janine? The answer that yes, it is like a program. The essence of what you mean by program.
Okay, so the order kind of happens by itself.
Oh, it's interesting. You just, oh, I love that. You just pointed out the order and the chaos are both the essence in itself, because you're right. But I don't like the word chaos. The chaos has too many, it has a pejorative meaning.
Well,
freedom. I would say freedom.
It doesn't necessarily, but it, you know.
Yeah. Pejorative. I would say freedom. The word chaos to me is freedom. What you call chaos, I just call freedom. If that seems chaotic to you, that's fine. But I just see freedom, unbounded, unlimitless. Remember,
unbounded, yeah.
It's taken on the characteristics of the original parents. What are the parents? One parent is unlimited and unbounded. That's the chaos. And one parent is the clarity. That's the alive part. That's the aware part. That's the lucid part. That's the lucid part. So the energy is going to be, so that's the energy part is the alive part. And then the space or the unlimited. So it's basically unlimited energy, I guess, is what we're talking about. Right, Janine?
Well, I don't really know how to comment on space. Is that really the topic of what we're talking about?
Space just being, and again, I don't know how you're hearing the word space, just being like, let's say essence or capacity or the ability to be, isness, not outer space. Again, I'm not sure, you know.
If it wasn't for space, how would this couch be sitting here right now? You know.
Right, but aren't we talking about aware space?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's an important distinction. Yes. Oh, okay. So repeat the question.
My question is that does, oh yes,
the energy in space.
The energy, yeah. I'm trying to answer your question of, does the energy just do things willy-nilly? And I was saying it does not do things willy-nilly. It's going to do things that are programmed from the aware space.
Right. So the awareness part of it is the consciousness part of it, and so there's not as much willy-nilly going on.
Okay, I could go with that. Yes, because it's determined in some way. It's determined just by that slope I'm always talking about, that guiding principle. This is the guiding part. So remember this thing I always come back to. There's moving and there's guiding, right? This is the moving part, and then this is the guiding part. You thinking you're moving freely, but you're really being guided, and you just don't see it.
Yeah, you can look
I
at
would
it
say partially guided, not completely. Do you think it's completely determined?
Oh, I see what you're talking about. You're talking about like free will and things like that. I think that's a quirk of time. I think those are only quite, I think in time, that's confusing because of time. So no, I think those questions are always neither. If you're asking me if things are predetermined, no. Do we have free will? No, none of those things. So it's not, people think is because things are not determined, there's free will, or because there's no free will, things are determined. I don't believe in any of them. None of them. None of those.
One way to look at it, maybe, and hopefully this isn't going to muddy the conversation, but clarify it. One way to maybe look at it is there is unlimited potential, but guiding it is evolution.
Yeah.
Okay. It's always trying to evolve. You know, you may start with a simple cell, but it's always trying to evolve to lower its entropy. And by lowering its entropy, it becomes more complex, more ordered, more apparent,
and that's the guidance.
More conscious. You know, like think of just unbounded nothingness, and then throw this simple program called evolution on top of it, and you get from you know, from a nothing, a big bang, you get stars, giraffes, and humans,
Okay,
and
so
rose
that-
bushes.
So chaos isn't totally, chaos and energy, pure energy. There's that evolutionary principle and force that's quite powerful.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and so forgive me for bringing chaos into the conversation. It is just a path that it's used by Freemasons, Hermeticists, and people of that ilk. They have a whole dictum of, order from chaos.
But
But we're
going.
not playing in their school, so sorry I brought that.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. No, you were extremely helpful. Thank you, Rod. But I still want to go back to your thing about the let's say free will and determinism you're talking about, Janine. The way I used to explain that to somebody was like when you take your dog for a walk. And then now we get back to what I was trying to explain between there's moving and there's guiding. So let's say my dog going for the walk is the moving part. The guiding principle is the fact that he doesn't know it, but we're going to McDonald's, whether he likes it or not. He doesn't know that. So he's moving within the range of his movements, but the guidance is me taking him to a preset destination. You see what I'm saying? And so nature, evolution is guiding us, but yet you're moving within it. So therefore you could say your actions and all that, that's the free will part. And then the guidance. And by the way, guidance could just be what Sigmund Freud would say is that Sigmund Freud would say the reason that we tell ourselves and we tell our friends, the reason we choose the girlfriends in the movies we like are not the reasons that we tell ourselves, we tell our girlfriends. They're for reasons we don't know. They're unconscious reasons that are guiding us. They're so we are unconsciously, we are being guided. So yes, you can have all the free will and action apparently, but you're being guided constantly. So just like my dog thinks it's walking, I can sniff here, I can sniff there. He doesn't know it, but he's being guided on a trip. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's really cool. And still other things, undetermined things can interrupt your trip and you can wind up at, Burger King. But I would take issue on going to McDonald's as an evolutionary step.
I'm sorry, I'm lazy. My brain's lazy.
Yeah, but
I'm just having fun.
You wind up at McDonald's, Janine, and find out you don't like that crap. That's
true.
So you learn.
Exactly. I love that point. Everything's good. Everything teaches you, even suffering.
This is such a great conversation. Thanks, guys.
Isn't it? See that? It was impromptu. It was.